What it do, y'all? G Rose, Roosevelt for Prez. This is the Crypto Hour. And of course, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I have a bit of a different show for you today. I'm introducing a new segment called the Crypto Hour Fireside. This is where I'll be interviewing founders, CEOs, and project developers. And today I'm happy to introduce the founder of Headline, which is one of my favorite projects on the Algorand blockchain. Super insightful interview. We're going to go deeper into what Headline is, some of its origins. You guys stay tuned, check it out. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Let's get to it.
All right, so I am here with the man himself, Aaron Martinez. And how are you doing today, man? I know it's been an eventful 2022 so far. How are you holding up?
I'm doing great. Yeah, it's been a great year so far. Kind of a little bit of a roller coaster at first, but yeah, I feel pretty good about it.
Absolutely. And so, I've done my best, to explain Headline. There's a lot to explain, right? How would you describe Headline to someone who maybe dibbled and dabbled in the blockchain space, but they're not novice, but they don't really know too much about it? How would you explain Headline?
Yeah, so basically you could think of Headline as an ecosystem builder. We're building a lot of applications that are all going to be integrated in a really interesting way. And we're touching basically every different aspect or part of the blockchain space. With NFTs, with software development, with social media. We have something for everybody underneath the Headline umbrella is a good way to think about it.
Absolutely. And so Headline kind of starting as like headline news. I'd be interested, I'm sure other people would. What was that transition like from like headline news going into like this full-on software tech company?
Unexpected, completely unexpected. So a really short story of how this happened is we started the Headline News project and we did the first airdrop for the HDL token. And then after that, we applied to the Algorand Foundation for a grant. We had a grant proposal for our news site. But we learned very quickly that wasn't something that the Algorand Foundation typically funds, right? So, in the conversations back and forth, we determined that there was a real need in the Algorand ecosystem for some developer tooling in the blockchain space. That was like interesting because we were not a software developers, right? So we basically learned while we went without any like prior history doing coding or software development from May or June until now. We've learned all of it and built all of it at the same time.
Wow. And so that leads me to ask, what is it about Algorand that kind of piqued your interest, made you want to work directly with them versus, say, other blockchains that may have been available?
All right, here's a funny story that I've never told anybody before, like in a podcast or anything. So this should be pretty funny. So when we were originally making the HDL token, I had originally planned to do it on Ethereum, right? Because that was like the big thing back in January or February of last year.
Right. Yeah.
And I had like the contracts done and it was ready to get like minted, right? But it was one of the days in, I think, either January or February where the gas prices like skyrocketed. And it ended up being, when I tried to mint it, I lost like $700 because it wasn't enough gas fees to mint the HDL token on the Ethereum blockchain.
Oh,
and when that happened, I basically was like, absolutely not. There has got to be a common sense alternative that isn't going to absolutely kill you. That's a totally impractical, unfeasibly expensive way to like build anything, right?
Yeah.
So like, even if we had managed to do that, we couldn't have even done an airdrop because of the cost of transmitting the tokens to other people.
Right.
It's exorbitantly high. So I was like, there has to be a good alternative. It's really cheap, really fast. Started looking around. I was looking at Solana, a little bit at Cardano, but then when I saw Algorand, I was like, oh, these guys have it together. They have an excellent long-term plan. They have the tech. They have a great strategy. They have institutional support. It's everything that I was looking for. It checked all the boxes. And then when I went to like mint the HDL token, it cost like maybe 5 to 10 cents. I was like, oh, I found my home. And so then I just started building from there, basically.
Right. And so speaking of minting the HDL tokens, what inspired you, or was there any method to having a supply of, say, 25 million versus 10 billion, 1 billion, et cetera?
Yes, absolutely. So really, it was the fact that, numbers like a billion or more, those are hard numbers to like get your head around, right? Especially if you're trying to quantify what your holdings are for something. If someone's like, oh, I have, 277 million tokens that are all worth, 0.05 cents, calculations get super complicated. And I was like, I want to make this really simple for people. What's a good round number, practical, applicable? 25 million. So 25 million it was. And since then, I've never had issues with trying to like figure out, percentages and stuff. It's pretty easy. So I'm happy with it. Well, what's important to note about the token is that we've never sold it. So all of the tokens that exist in the market today were ones that our supporters received through airdrops at the beginning of the project. But it just goes to show you how strong our support system is, that, on their own, they put it on Tinyman, and on their own, they have basically created this entire structure of value around it before we've even done that yet, right? So we've never profited from it. It was always something that we had distributed for free because of the stage the project was in and, the regulatory framework around the whole thing. But it just goes to show you that there's that much of a grassroots support system for it already. And we're still like in the first inning, basically, with it.
Exactly. And that leads me to ask you, Aaron, so as far as the support from Algorand, to what extent are they supporting? Because one thing that kind of got me into Algorand, I'd invested in the Oculus. I'm coming from the music industry, and Oculus being, something to me that's revolutionary for that. I had noticed Lee sitting down with people from the foundation and just this support that they were given. And can you kind of speak on that support for people that kind of understand but don't fully understand the extent of the support?
Definitely, yeah. So we have an existing or long-term relationship with the Algorand Foundation with some of our projects that are focused on building developer tooling, which is kind of like the launch pad for a lot of some of our more ambitious projects. So we work with them to, create things for developers to use, and, they're able to offer guidance. And yeah, no, it's a really, really great working relationship. And, I highly recommend anybody that's interested in blockchain development to definitely start with Algorand, because you'll find a really, really well-informed, structured support system with the foundation and what they're able to provide, both in terms of their experience in the space, and then also the technical ability of the stuff that they're able to give in the tooling and everything. It's really great. Yeah.
Good. And it's been crazy with the Tinyman exploit, and I think that it's was handled pretty well. And I wanted to commend you and the headline team for your leadership. I've been saying that. But when it comes to the Algorand space and kind of the perception that I get and other people get, you have like this clear-cut leadership mentality. And where does that come from? Because you could have sat back and just, you really took the initiative to help. Where does that motivation come from?
So this was a really unique situation that I accidentally found myself in, because we were launching our staking program that same day, right? We had announced that for a 24-hour period, we were going to do a liquid staking program for liquidity on the Tinyman DEX. So there were hundreds of people that were commenting and DMing and emailing about this program that we were setting up right when the exploit happened. And because we were really tapped in on social media, going late into the night, we were really active because we had to monitor the situation to make sure that all of our supporters and everything that they were planning to do with the staking thing whether we were going to have to cancel it, whether it was going to be able to continue. So we were like really tapped in late into the night when all this was happening. And, it got to the point when, it started to dawn on us that it was a much more serious situation than we originally understood it to be. Mm-hmm. That, the best course of action was going to be to try to like get a really clear idea of the seriousness of the situation. So we put out a bounty to get a report done, first and foremost, to make sure that, people that were associated with our projects and everything, that there was security around what was happening. But once we realized that nothing was secure, essentially, we were like, and the gravity really dawned on us. We're like, we have to get the word out as quickly as possible. I ended up sleeping for like 3 hours that night. I went to bed at 4:30, got back up at 7:30. One of the devs that was working on the report, he messaged me and he's like, this affects everybody in every single pool. This is a really big deal. And there was never a thought to whether or not we should release it. We got it out as quickly as possible. I can't tell you how many people like DM'd and emailed and said that, because we released it when we did and the detail that we went into and, specifically the example that was in there was like instrumental in their decision to pull their liquidity. And we just saw like basically a tidal wave of like, all of this stuff happening at the same time. It was like people have described it as sending a shockwave through the Algorand ecosystem because the gravity of it dawned on everybody at the same time. And that was my mindset once we put it out there. And, half an hour later, there was this whole other like wave that like hit me from people who, and I didn't realize this when we put it out there. And there was a comment that's really stuck with me that somebody had where they were like, it's one thing to yell at your neighbors that their house is burning when yours isn't. And that had not occurred to me when we first released it because there was a list of pools that were the most at risk, right? And the only way that you can, tell people to get out of these liquidity pools is to tell them that they're at risk, right? But from some people's perception, it seems like what we were doing was non-constructive. And that had not even occurred to me while we were doing it. And a lot of the serious like developers and stuff I've talked to since then were like, yeah, that information was like widely available on social media through Telegram, through Discord. They were talking about Twitter Spaces and all this stuff. And any serious developer that would have been able to replicate it would have had, all kinds of time to do it already, right? So, it was just a really, really unexpected backlash that just was staggering almost. And there was like one point, it was like such an emotionally draining, like 24 hours. I like almost fell over in the middle of the day. And I ended up having to go in a dark room by myself for like a little bit of time just to try to collect myself. And remember, I didn't ask to be in that situation. It was only because we were trying to do our staking part at the exact same time that I felt like I got into this, role where I had to basically disseminate information to the entire community because of the gravity of the situation.
Right.
And in hindsight, and then this is something that we're going to make sure, is addressed in the future as well, is that there's essentially like a watchdog organization or a rapid response group, right, whose responsibility it is to basically disseminate information as quickly as possible once one of these exploits happens. Bounties for, bug bounties going forward, because it's important to note that, and this is a philosophical thing about DeFi, a DEX is supposed to be a decentralized exchange, which means it's incumbent on individuals to do investigations and stuff like that as well, which is also part of where my mindset was when all of this happened, right? And so going forward, it's going to be important that there be kind of like an organization or something in place that can respond quickly in these kinds of situations. And so that's something that we're going to be really focusing on, as we make sure all this stuff gets put back together.
Yeah, but I'm glad you spoke so candidly on that and just addressed it because, from the outside looking in, I thought it was a little bit unfair, some of the blowback from that because, like you said, you were already dialed in because of what you were launching. And the leadership aspect is what I'm looking at. There was a ton of misinformation, and the fact that you tried to provide some clarity is commendable. All right, and so with that being said, does that make you have to kind of rethink and reanalyze some of what you're building as far as making it more secure? Do you think we're just at a stage in DeFi right now where things like that are going to happen? It's just part of the journey, and people are going to build things to try to mitigate that.
So it depends on the kind of products you're building. We haven't built any like pure DeFi plays yet. A lot of what we do is in the middle, right? So like something like Algoswap or Algopay, we allow people to interact with smart contracts and stuff without having actually made those smart contracts themselves, right? So things have to get signed by a wallet, and then they interact with these basically DeFi elements. Going forward, we're going to start moving more into those actual like pure DeFi plays. And once we get to that point, it is really incumbent on us, to make sure that there is basically like bug bounty programs are really important, right? You want to incentivize like white hat hackers and groups like that to look for exploits and give you time to address them. And we're going to try to emphasize the value of that to the ecosystem moving forward. And I think it's probably a good thing. I mean, I don't want to say it's a good thing, but I think it's important that something like this happen as early on as it did, as a big wake-up call to the community that security is really important, that having these third-party organizations who do, watchdog and bounty programs and everything, those things are really important elements, right? And as more and more of these DeFi applications come online, it's going to be really important to have a good foundation in place that can respond quickly in these kinds of events. So, I believe that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and Algorand's going to be 10 times stronger, because of this and after we come out the other side of it.
Agreed. And so now that we've touched on that, I want to get into some of these products because there's quite a few. You spoke on it. I'm trying to keep up here, Aaron. I'm telling you. But I think one of the most interesting things, really the one that kind of was my introduction to Headline, this Pipline UI. I do a little bit of like web development where WordPress came and it made it super easy, right? And then now you have Wix and Squarespace, Shopify, all these things make it really easy, drag and drop. But now having a Pipline UI, how big is that? And kind of break it down for the people.
Right. So our main philosophy with Pipline is that we want to make it as simple as possible to interact with blockchains. With some of our tools like Algopay and Algoswap, you can literally copy like a 7-line, 7 lines of code directly onto your website, and you'll automatically get like the tool you need to interact with the DEX, to be able to send transactions with a really like mature UI UX experience at the same time. So basically creating no code tooling for really like enterprise grade interaction with the blockchain is really like hardcore Web3 stuff, right? That we're just on the cusp of all the innovation that we're going to be able to do, because these are all like stepping stones, right? As we progress and we have a really like exciting like technological advantage because we have done so much of the framework already for this. We're going to be building more and more advanced tools that are still going to be copy paste for people. So even if, like for example, like with Algoswap, you can paste it onto Squarespace, right? The idea 6 months ago that you could run a decentralized exchange on Squarespace, which is like the most like anti-developer friendly sort of website environment you could possibly have, is super groundbreaking. Like it's been called the world's first embeddable DEX because you can literally embed it anywhere on any website that accepts like custom JavaScript. And, so these are like beginner tools that we've created, right. But Pipline UI gets much more advanced and you can do a very complicated blockchain interaction. We have 2 new dApps coming out in the next like week or 2 that are part of our current Algorand Foundation project that are going to be really, really innovative. One of them is for developers. It's like a really like technical tool, but it's like really interesting. which could potentially like influence the way people think about smart contracts when they're doing construction.
Mm-hmm.
And the other tool is for DAOs. So it has a lot to do with like DAO infrastructure, and one of the like key foundational pieces you need in order to be able to build DAOs on Algorand.
Okay, and I was going to ask you about those two dApps, because I know that's right around the corner, and I spoke on that in my last headline video as well. But something that I really thought was dope was this Algo Astros play. I want you to talk about that, and then along with that, talking about this Algo glyph, because to me, when I first saw that, I'm not gonna lie to you, kind of took me back a little bit, because I was like, wait, what are these guys? Are they just like sitting there just coming up with are they brainstorming? Are they like, hey, let's try this, let's try that? Because I think it's so innovative. So talk about the Algo Astros, and then also tie in how, Algo glyph is gonna help the whole NFT community.
Sure. All right. So Algo Astros started out because like I was really getting interested about the NFT space, but we didn't have any exposure to it because we hadn't built like a product for it or anything like that. So I was like, let's come up with a cool NFT collection. But I was like, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. We're going to do 400 pieces, individual pieces. Let's come up with a cool like aesthetic for it, and let's see where it goes. Right now, we started kind of like we created a whole business plan for it, and there was all the stuff we had to build a website for it while we're doing everything else. Bear in mind. And then we got to a point, I was like, wait, we don't have a graphic designer. So I was like, all right, I guess. So I had to make them myself. I made the first 42 of them. So the first 42 NFTs I made personally.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So like, and then like they were, we could not have possibly imagined how successful it would be. To the point where one of them sold on the secondary market for like over 3,000 algos 2 days ago. Right. Yes. Just a little under $5,000 or something like that. One sold at auction for 3,300 algos, over $5,000. And now, because, that's how high the demand is, every week they get 50 algos more expensive. So the next week is going to be 300, then 350. So by March, they're going to be like 850 algos each. And then by the summer, and that's only at Astro. What are we going to be at by March? Maybe like 100, 150? And then we're still doing a 400 Astro collection. So by the summertime, they're going to cost 1,800 algo each for the raffle, not including auctions or anything. It's basically a major revenue stream. Not only that, but we're doing a like special Astro specifically for forum users. We were asking about what would be a cool like reward for forum users at their social network. So we're making a special Astro specifically for them. It's only 25 algos each. It's not part of our official collection because we're making 1,000 of them. And then each forum user is allowed to purchase 3 each. So just with that, that's $40,000 for essentially one drop that could potentially sell out in 1 or 2 days. On top of the primary Astro collection. And what this is allowing us to do, all of this additional revenue, is we're basically putting it directly back into the community, whether it be through hiring additional developers or creating these bounty programs. We see, our role is to try to like spur innovation and, create the foundation to build more and more exciting things on and give it back to the community. So it's really cool. When people buy these Astros, they can literally see that basically funding going directly back into the community through these different projects that we have.
Yeah, but I definitely catch your drift on that, because like I said, there's a lot to fun. There's a lot of things moving. But back to this algo glyph, right? There's going to be a lot of use cases for it, but I know there's going to be a lot of people excited just in terms of like NFTs and what you can do with that as far as digital signatures. Kind of go through some of the use cases that you foresee with this algo glyph, also explaining what it is.
Right. So algo glyph, in really simple terms, is a way to do data storage on chain. When you do a transaction on Algorand, you have a note field, right? And you're allowed to do up to 1 kilobyte of data in this note field. So talking to my guys for a long time, we've been brainstorming what's a practical way to do on-chain data storage. what can we store in 1 kilobyte or less directly on chain? And we try to do a lot of stuff with PNGs, like JPEGs and like actual NFTs, but we realized that the only way to do it is you gotta like really crunch it down and then potentially use AI to like, re-enhance it. But that's kind of like a hacky solution. It's not like a pure blockchain solution. And then the thought occurred to me, I was like, wait a second, what about signatures? What if we could put a signature in a note field that has to be less than a kilobyte? So they're like, all right, well, we'd have to encode it, decode it. We'll have to have a pad for the signature. And so we created an entire dApp that does the encoding, the decoding, allows the signature. And even when you're doing your signature, it tracks it by byte, the size of your signature. So like as you're doing each stroke of your signature, it has a little meter that's showing you how many bytes your signature is. So that once you put it in the note field, you know how much of your space you're using up. And the use cases are really compelling. There's some really compelling use cases for it. And really like boring like use cases that are actually really interesting too would be like, let's say for example, you have to do a really big on-chain transaction, right? If you have accountants or your bank, they're going to ask you for a signature. And we actually have people reach out after we release this that are like, this is like incredible because my bank keeps asking me for my signature on this stuff. And a lot, banks, courts of law, they're not going to accept ones and zeros for your signature, right? They want to see an actual signature on stuff. So the ability to actually put your signature in a note field, and we've asked people, like nobody can think of an example on their chain, even Ethereum, that has a tool like this. They might exist, but we don't know of any yet, right? So that shows you how like cutting edge this could potentially be. That would allow for signing contracts, for doing billing, all of these kinds of things. And then if you think about NFTs, this is where it gets really exciting. So if you're an NFT artist and you have a collection, it's a great value add, right? To be able to include a signature on your NFTs. Or like, let's say you have an NFT collection with multiple artists, right? The individual artists could sign their NFTs that contribute to this collection. That's another really cool use case for it. Or like with the metaverse, if you have a digital identity, your digital identity can have a consistent signature. Even if it's not your real identity, it could be a pseudonym type identity. But having a consistent digital signature for it could also be interesting as a lot of these like metaverse applications start to come out.
Absolutely, yeah.